All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 65 of the Hideout, where we will be discussing Web3 gaming in the Metaverse. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Frontera, and I am one of the co-founders and CEO of Apollo Entertainment, the company behind Satoshiverse and the Legion's 2029 game. The Satoshiverse is a blockchain-themed superhero universe that we've now been building for about 4 years. It started as a comic collaboration between ourselves and DC and Marvel comic artist Jose Delbo, and has evolved into the world that we're in now. And we're doing a lot of different things, including our Legion's 2029 game, which we've been working on now for about 2.5 years. It's a fast-paced hack and slash game built on Unreal Engine 5. It's for desktops, free to play. And we're doing a ton of activations right now for those who get involved in this early alpha. It's live in mainnet alpha on Polygon. I won't talk too much about it. We'll get into a little more detail later. But for those of you who are interested, who haven't checked it out, I pinned a tweet to the top of the Spaces that has all the information, including some gameplay footage. So definitely check it out because it'll do it more justice than I can. All right, so today we're going to have an awesome panel where we're going to be going into some different topics with our guests. We'll start out by doing some quick introductions, and then we'll jump into the questions. If you guys could just give us, a quick introduction about yourselves, the team, what you're building, and ways that we can get involved, and then feel free to pin anything that you would like to the top of the Spaces, especially if you have videos or things that are more illustrative. We love to see that so that people can really get a sense of what you're building. So why don't we start with Omniverse? Can you give us a quick introduction? Welcome back, and good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. Thanks for the warm welcome. Always a pleasure to be here. So my name is Corey. I go by Engineered, and I am the COO and co-founder of Omniverse. We are building a Web3 gaming platform. We actually have it built. We have our about 25 games that are live. You can download them from the Google Play Store. We're actually in the process of getting them available on web apps and adding them to the iOS platform as well. And so at a very high level, you can kind of come in, onboard into our system very easily, I might add. I think one of the barriers that we've been trying to solve is the complicated onboarding process and just the fact that many Web3 gaming ecosystems are fragmented. You have to go into multiple platforms. You have to use your wallet. You have to, buy the native coins from a centralized exchange and then go to a DEX to buy the project token and then use that to buy an NFT. So we really brought all of those parts and pieces in-house under one umbrella. And we have a pretty smooth platform and a lot of content that's available for you guys to play. So yeah, I'd love to see you guys in the community and see you start enjoying the games that we built.
I love it, and definitely if you have any videos or anything for people to look, feel free to pin something to the Spaces, because I'm sure there's some awesome gameplay and functionality that you could showcase. But great to have you back. Let's jump over to No Futuristic with Orion Network.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry, I just took a bite of my, I have a parfait, so I'm like mid-bite. But yes, Orium Network, I'm the partnership lead. I'm here with Ernani, who is the founder. And we do rentals for Web3 gaming assets, as well as other NFTs for different use cases. So our whole thing is we have EIP 7432, which is NFT role delegation for, just different roles for each NFT, different use cases. So we have a marketplace that's launching, and we're partnered with Abagachi. We're actually launching a rental marketplace for their wearables in very soon, like pretty much this weekend. So I can let Ernani speak to it more. But yeah, good morning.
Awesome. No, yeah, thanks for joining us. Really interesting. Ernani, I'd love to hear a quick introduction, and if you could tell us a little bit about how the rentals work, that would be awesome to understand as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone for having me. My name is Anani. I'm the founder of Oyun. And as No Futuristic said, Oyun is essentially building a rental marketplace. Our mission is to essentially facilitate more people to come into the space, into the Web3 gaming space, and other verticals as well that we are working on. So yeah, we have been doing NFT rentals for a long time. I believe at almost 3 years now, we managed thousands of rentals to newcomers that came to the space. And in 2023, late 2023, we decided to take a step back and essentially create a standard that would allow any Web3 game to introduce rentals into their ecosystem. And we are building a marketplace on top of this standard. That's what essentially what we're all about.
And so, I've seen a few different, and this is going a little bit on a tangent, but I'm pretty curious. I've seen different implementations of rental standards for NFTs. How does the custodial system work? Is it essentially deposited into a contract and then a different token is issued, or is it sent to the user directly with some sort of clawback? How does that work with rentals, or I guess in your ecosystem?
Yeah, essentially we built an abstraction and we submit that to the Ethereum Foundation. We hope that gets accepted soon and it's going to be a standard for the broader Ethereum ecosystem. But there are two main implementations. Essentially, when you rent an NFT, you can either deposit on a contract or you can prevent it from being transferred. So yeah, we basically work together with games to see which use case or which implementation works better for them. But both of these work essentially. You either lock the asset, right? You prevent people from transferring, even though they are still on their wallets, or you deposit on their own contract. Both work.
Got it. Okay, cool. That makes sense. I'm excited to dive in a little deeper. All right, let's jump over to Spencer, who's gonna give us a quick introduction and then take us into the questions.
What's going on, guys? Yeah, my name is Spencer Vogel. I'm the business development manager for Apollo and Satoshiverse. Just getting into the format for the space a little bit today. So we're going to start out with a question for everyone for the group. I'll call on somebody to start, and then feel free to just jump in from there. And then we're going to get into some individual questions, and then if we have time at the end, we'll jump into some more questions for the group. And then lastly, for everyone who's here listening live, we're going to be doing a giveaway of some Satoshi's crystals. So make sure that you stick around until the end for a chance to be able to win that. All right. So getting into the first question here, and maybe Corey over at Omniverse, maybe you could start us off on this one. So outside of gameplay itself, what do you think are some of the best ways to keep Web3 gaming communities engaged?
Yeah, good question. And I'm glad you said besides the gameplay itself, because I think that's an important one. Really the critical one, right? I mean, people don't want to play garbage, but I think in general, giving people options and a variety of things, right? Because you make one game, it's not going to cater to everybody out there. I think in a lot of cases, a lot of the Web3 games that are being developed are really good, and they're kind of geared towards like serious gamers and people who understand crypto and Web3. But I think what we're trying to do at Omniverse is cater to the masses, right? Give everybody something that they want to play. Everything from I don't know, like a Candy Crush like game, some hyper casual games, all the way to those AAA quality games and everything in between, and making it easy for them to kind of come into play. In addition to the options, like keeping it fresh, right? So once you have a game, giving people the opportunity to continue to engage in the game and in the platform itself with add-ons and new NFTs and upgrades. And there's a lot of good games out there that have done a really good job at kind of continuing the gamification of their game. For example, like Heroes of Mavia was just released about a month ago, and they've done a really good job at kind of setting up their game such that people want to kind of log in regularly, and you pretty much have to, otherwise your base gets attacked and you get all your resources stolen. So I think just knowing how to gamify your game is very important. I also think that kind of the community building is really important, and one way to do that is obviously with things like tournaments and kind of other community engagements, right? Because one of the big, I don't know, awesome things that I've seen with Web3 is that the amazing communities that have been developed, and that's really a big part of it, right? So giving people the opportunity to not just come in and play by themselves, but do it with others, to challenge themselves against others and really kind of compete and earn achievements and kind of continue to incentivize that gameplay are really all important, and things that we're doing at Omniverse.
Yeah, I can add to that a little bit. I think that that you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? The reason I think the question was aside from gameplay is because yeah, that's such an important part of keeping people engaged. But I do think it comes down to kind of what you said. If you're building a gaming ecosystem or just an IP in general, we have to kind of recognize that we're still within a very niche section of the space, and you may have lots of people in your community who may not be hardcore gamers or who may want to engage with the IP in different ways. So I think it is important to be thinking outside of the four walls of the game, and thinking about ways to continue to create meaningful experiences for your community within the IP, and that's gonna create stronger bonds, I think, all around. And then the community itself, right? Like, even if it's not the game, keeping the community engaged can be a matter of doing activities with the community. It could be weekly game nights within the Discord. It could be, getting into other games that are multiplayer if your game's not multiplayer, and having social aspects. We've done stuff. For example, we've had parties in Decentraland where people could come in with linked wearables and see each other and interact and talk to each other, and that's been fun. We're probably long overdue for another one of those parties because that was a lot of fun. But I think there's lots of ways to continue to engage with the community. I do think gamifying certain aspects of the experience in a more I guess, open and accessible way is kind of the gold standard, right? If you can essentially have an ecosystem where certain parts of it are something that people want to come back to every day and engage with, and because it somehow offers a greater value in their gaming experience or just within the community itself, I think that's the best case. But I think it can be simple. I also, I guess, the other thing that really interests me, especially going to the kind of fact that it is a smaller ecosystem, is collaboration, and finding like-minded individuals in other communities and creating value with other projects for both communities. I think when you can do that, you really start to lean into the Web3 ethos a lot more, and I think that it allows you to expand in a way that's much more sustainable. I think there's definitely temporary engagement tactics that I think a lot of projects are doing really well. But then I think the question starts to become, okay, what happens when that incentive no longer exists, or long term, and I think we just have to think about how do we build kind of foundational engagement? How do you build your core base? And I think that, yeah, it goes back to the idea of community. The strongest community members, I think, are going to be people who associate the experiences they have positively, right? If they're, at the end of the day, people are choosing to spend their time doing a certain thing, whether it's playing the game or talking to people in the Discord, different things are going to appeal to different people. And I think it's kind of understanding what you offer and what people enjoy about it, and trying to really amplify those things.
Yeah, and if I could ask to kind of expand on that IP element a little bit. So so I grew up like reading comic books, playing video games, and so I was really excited about Legions, and I was really sad to hear about the artist that you guys were working with and his passing. But I think beyond just the gaming, there's a lot of opportunity for expansion of the IP that is developed with gaming to kind of go beyond just the game itself. So, for example, NFT comic books, that's another thing that we've dabbled into. So some of the characters within our games that we have NFTs for that you can play in the game. We've also issued some NFT comic books centered around those characters. And so, I don't know, really kind of bringing that IP together in all these different forms is another good way. And I think that's to some degree what you were speaking about with the collaborations with other teams. That's a good way to kind of, I don't know, push the boundaries of the base IP from outside of just the game itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just depending on how your lore is and ways to expand that, I think in Web3 we have kind of the ability to do some things that are more interesting on a community level, and kind of have more of the make your own experience type of setups, because we have the ability to kind of tailor things based on ownership, based on certain traits, based on different things. And what I love to see is when people get kind of creative with the tech and find ways to expand upon it. And so it's interesting because some of it doesn't have anything to do with NFTs, right? Some of it's just that some of these companies that are pioneering in the NFT space are also pioneering in the comic entertainment space, and you see some really cool things that are new for the Web2 space coming out of NFT, or Web3 based projects. So yeah, I definitely think that at the end of the day, it's about, thinking about things a little outside the box and finding new ways to engage, but also not being afraid to kind of lean into the things that we know have worked for, 20, 30 years, and creating social experiences, creating, a good positive community vibes, competition, like you said before, through tournaments. There's a lot of staples that I think we can kind of lean into that are gonna help any community.
No futuristic, you had your hand up before?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, because we're talking about like how can we engage communities outside of gameplay. I want to talk about my experience in Aavegotchi, because the gaming protocol is paired, like the partnered with the Aavegotchi DAO, and I'm one of the multi-sig signers. So that, as we wait for the development of gameplay over the last 3 years and more games have come out, especially DAO created games, like community members going out and creating games, which the DAO is funded. It's been a great engagement tool, because even in downtimes, we're all still hanging out together, running our, managing our treasury, which at one point is like, $30 million. We bought 3 million of Ethereum, like, cheaper, so we're actually up like 2 or 3 million on that. So having the DAO aspect, sometimes it can impede in gameplay development and, like, just the game development in general, because we have like a whole entity that now wants to vote on mechanics and do all this other stuff. It creates a lot of engagement because we all feel like we're part of the game, and watching it being created and the ecosystem and the economics being built out around it is just very engaging, I think, for our community.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I would agree with. We've seen something similar in our community where you have some testers and hardcore gamers, even before stuff was released on mainnet and counted, who really derive a lot of fun and pleasure from getting in there in the early phases, giving feedback, seeing that feedback implemented, having conversations at a stage where things are still being built, where they can see their feedback, um, really be implemented at like a real level, a level that you really don't get in the Web2 gaming space. And we've definitely enjoyed kind of building with our community, and even things like having contests where community members submit art, and then that art or their name appears in the game. I think can go a long way to really making your community feel part of what you're building. And I think for a lot of Web3 projects that are kind of bootstrapping and doing a lot of what they're doing because of community funding and whatnot, whether it's a DAO or just a project that funded through a collection or whatever it might be. I think that's super important, because the community really is part of what you're building, and you're building it with them, and to an extent for them and for the people that will come after them. And I think it makes it that much more important to have an element of collaboration with your community. And it sounds like that's the same thing Aavegotchi is doing with the DAO. So that's a really cool concept. I like that. Although I can only imagine, having been in DAOs before, some of the crazy back and forths and talks and headaches that probably creates on the forum. So yeah, I'd be interested to see and hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it does get like kind of picky, and I'll use like we're talking about NFT rentals. So I have a rival, and me and him fight sometimes. And then part of our fight was I borrowed his Avagachi and then made all these screenshots of him talking, saying very flattering things about me. Which interesting tactic. It was effective, but I took the Web3 route to handle my DAO problems, so it was cool.
I love that. That's awesome.
Nani, do you have anything to add before we move on to some individual questions here?
No, I agree with most of what has been said, and yeah, basically waiting to see what are the subjects that we're going to tap into.
Awesome, sounds good. Moving on. First individual question is to Omniverse here. So you guys are actually working to bridge Web 2 companies into Web 3. And I was thinking, what do you think it takes for a Web 2 company to make that transition? And what are the biggest key benefits you see of making that transition?
Yeah, good question. So we're talking a lot about gaming, right? So ultimately, Omniverse sees gaming as the means to kind of start to bring Web 2 applications into Web 3, and so are really using that as our proof of concept and kind of the of our platform. I think it probably doesn't always make sense for a Web 2 company to move into Web 3, but there's a ton of applications out there where it does make sense. And I think every day more and more there's new, I don't know, use cases for blockchain being developed, everything from, I don't know, like supply chain and procurement and all kinds of different things. And it really comes down to the, I don't know, immutable nature of blockchain and thinking outside of the box and where that makes sense to apply. So I think there really needs to be kind of like a benefit that blockchain provides to the system. We're seeing some pretty, I don't know, clever applications of it for everything from like messaging services and like emails. So instead of an email address, you use your wallet address / ENS domain, and having kind of that messaging platform built on the blockchain so that it is fully immutable. So I think that there's a ton of opportunities, and so I think one, it really needs to make sense, but there are a lot of cases where you may just not know that it makes sense, and so a lot of what we are doing, like I mentioned, is using gaming as the proof of concept for it, but ultimately we're developing the SDK to make it easy. And so I know that there's some, I don't know, questions about like what is appropriate to put on chain versus off chain. And so I think that really is an important question to ask for these types of applications.
We are actually going to be asking that question a little bit later today, so let's not get into it quite yet.
Beautiful.
So moving on to No Futuristic, and Ernani, you're welcome to answer as well. So I was wondering, what impact do you think rental markets will have on the Web3 gaming space going forward?
I'll let Ernani go first, and then I have my DGen response.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing NFT rentals since 2021, and in our peak in 2021, we had a little over 6,000 NFTs that we had rented to 1,800 people, right? So we did an extensive work on, onboarding new users, teaching them about how to set up their wallet, learn a little bit more about blockchain, learn how this blockchain essentially links with Web3 and with gaming and so on and so forth. So we did a lot of work on kind of evangelizing new users and bringing more new users to Web3 gaming. And rentals was a big part of that because many of the assets that we wanted people to use, they cost hundreds of dollars, in some cases thousands of dollars. So it's really difficult for you to convince a new user to come to the space with such a big financial barrier. So I see some games going through the route of introducing free-to-play modes, which is it's definitely useful. But we also believe in the value of the NFTs, and by allowing people to rent these NFTs, you essentially create this bond between the lender and the borrower that allow them to speak essentially to strategize, create a strategy within the game. How can they put their resources together in order to achieve a specific goal in the metaverse in the game? So yeah, by introducing rentals, you lower the financial barrier that people have to come into games. You also allow all these different use cases to happen within your platform, since these users they can now create all these different associations that previously were impossible. So I actually think that we are just scratching the surface in terms of use cases for NFT rentals. But that's what I see the space going initially, is making a good impact on onboarding and creating more of these relationships between borrowers and lenders.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think that, as a developer of a game that also has, an NFT project and an avatar collection that people, at one point put a lot of money into and still, that are valuable now. I think there is a balance that has to be struck between the accessibility of the game itself and, the value proposition of actually owning those core NFTs. Otherwise, there becomes less and less an incentive to own it. And so, a lot of what we've done with our NFTs, our core NFTs, is really try to drive a lot of the player economy and kind of the value in a sense of the game itself, through them. And I think that a large portion of that comes through playing the game. So in that sense, when you need, the people who own the NFTs may not have the time to play the games and rent, and therefore renting the NFTs may be an interesting, thing for them. And I know in our case, for example, we have, the game is a desktop-based game that requires decent system specs, and it's not available on Mac yet. So I think there's, probably a gap that could be closed by allowing people to essentially provide the utility of their items through a rental market to players who do want to actively play the game, but who may not have a collection of NFTs. And I think that kind of becomes, an interesting, margin there that, we saw with Axie, that, with the guilds and the scholarships and all that there, if a game has the right amount of momentum behind its player economy, there are opportunities for rentals. But I think that also has to come first, right? Because I think that in order, unless there is like just a wall, barring people from having access to the game without the NFT, which I think we're going to largely see disappear just because the eyeballs are so few right now in this space. I think you do need to have, pretty strong game economics in order for rentals to work. And so I think what we're going to end up seeing with rentals personally is that, there's not going to be huge adoption outside of the big games in the early days, but as these game economies become more developed, you get higher quality games. Rentals are going to become such a huge thing because it's such a, core feature. Trading, rentals, I think those will both be core features in most successful player economies. I guess one question I have, that kind of occurred to me, I definitely get the argument for, why you shouldn't allow transferability, of the assets when they are rented. But then I think about, we've been looking at apartments, and potentially buying an apartment that's occupied, and sometimes it becomes interesting, in that case where you can transfer ownership of an underlying asset, but that means that the income stream from a lease or a rental, whatever it might be transferred as well. And I'm wondering, if a model like that also could be something that might work long time, where people can actually see, smart contract enforced income streams from on a kind of a peer-to-peer level coming from NFTs that's already like locked in, right? So oh, this NFT's already been rented out for 12 months. If I buy it now, I'm going to get that 12 months of income stream. What do you think about that? Or do you think that non-transferability is kind of fundamental to rentals from for a different reason?
So what is important is for the owner or whoever previously owned the utility of that NFT to not have access to it anymore, since you have essentially rented that utility for someone else for a specific period of time. So that's what we are trying to achieve when we prevent the user from transferring their NFT or depositing on a contract. There is also the argument that, if your NFT is rented and you sell it to someone else, the buyer, it needs to be very clear for the buyer that they are buying an NFT that is rented, right? So that's one of the main arguments why we prevent transfers, or we ask people to deposit on a contract. That being said, something that we have been talking with different games, and we're still figuring out what is the right format for this. But essentially, whenever you rent an NFT, you can potentially get like another NFT, like a receipt for your rented NFT, and you can essentially sell that asset to someone else, giving the ability for the buyer to redeem the NFT once the rental expires with the rewards, right? So that's totally possible. And as long as these are different NFTs, right? The NFT that you rented is different from the receipt token that allows you to get that NFT back. I think it makes all the sense. But it just needs to be very clear, the separation between the two. Something that we are also super excited about, and we are discussing this with one of the games that we are working with, is the ability, is potentially a model called rent to own. So, for example, let's say if you rent a specific NFT for 3 months, you pay X amount of tokens, but you also, when you rent it, you can have an option to purchase that NFT by the end of the duration of 3 months. So that enables people to essentially experience the game or whatever experience you are providing with that NFT. And if they dig it, if they really like it and they want to commit further, they can make that next step of purchasing the NFT. And they can do that with a rent to own contract. That's what we're calling, which is essentially if your NFT costs, I don't know, 100 tokens, and you charge 10 tokens to rent it out, maybe the person can put the additional 90 tokens by the end of the contract to purchase that NFT from the buyer. So yeah, there are lots of different models that we are working on, and we actually brainstorm with our game partners to see how could they fit these different use cases. And hopefully we will be starting to introduce those over time in the platform.
Very cool. No, I really like it. Omniverse, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I just wanted to commend Ernani and what he and his team are doing. I mean, I think what he was talking about, like the rent to own. I mean, that's a real world like economic mechanism that exists, and kind of bringing that into Web3 blockchain space is awesome. And just kind of getting back to the gaming and the I don't know, overall need and desire for NFT rentals. My community has long voiced the desire to have something in our platform. We just haven't gotten to it, and so shamelessly, I'm hoping that I can reach out to you after this call, because I really like what you guys are doing, and I think it could lend itself very well to what we're doing.
Nice. Well, that's why we do this. Hopefully, that connection happens, and I'm actually very interested as well. So we'll have to see, how we might be able to work together. I think rentals, especially if you can get that standard approved, that's going to be huge. So definitely looking forward to seeing how that develops for you guys. All right, Spencer, back to you.
Yeah, no, Futuristic, did you want to give us your degen perspective on that question?
Yeah, sure. Like right now, I'm talking to someone in Abagachi who's a whale. He has a godlike piece. There's only 5 of them, and they greatly boost your stats for different games. So we're going into a tournament. I'm working out a deal to pay him $25 to borrow a $25,000 asset to literally just throw it on chain and play a little bit of gameplay to get the flex. So these are Veblen goods. Being able to rent them, it's like going and renting a Lamborghini and being able to just like ride around town for a little bit. You know, it's way out of my price range, but I can spend $25 to get the flex for a little bit. So I think the DGen play there works. Plus, we've also discussed like the idea of these NFT rentals expanding beyond Web3 gaming and moving into like IRL events. Like, say there's a Pudgy Penguin party, working it out so that you can rent a Pudgy to attend the party, assuming that, you know, the community is cool, you know, certain whitelist communities, but also integrating those kind of rentals into our rental marketplace eventually.
Love that. Yeah, there's definitely see a lot of use cases outside of that. Outside of what I do here with Satoshiverse and Apollo, I have a podcast called Comics and Crypto, and we talk a lot about the digital collectibles market, especially like specifically the licensed digital collectibles market. So a lot of stuff that like Marvel and Disney and big brands like that are releasing, and something we've talked about a lot is like doing rentals for like for example if like at D23 or whatever at one of Disney's big conferences they have a big after party. Maybe they want to rent out like the 1923 Walt Disney statue NFT for their party because that mint number is really significant for Disney and for all that, and it's really significant to a lot of people who are to be there and they'd be excited about it. But yeah, it's just a use case that we've talked about before, so I'm definitely excited for some of the things outside of gaming as well there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think as NFTs start to evolve and, we start to tokenize things that have more rental, rental innately within it, right? I think that having the infrastructure for rentals and have that being seamless and having kind of an accepted standard is going to be very, important. And I think gaming will be an excellent way to test it because we can be talking about potentially low dollar amounts with a ton of volume, to see, if it breaks, right? And then, before a yacht is tokenized and you can somehow rent the access key to it, or an apartment, with maybe tokenized access. You could see rentals, Web3 kind of revolutionizing the traditional rental market. I think about tokenized experiences as we start to move into VR and AR, right? And maybe rather than purchasing an experience, you can rent an experience. So if you have a warehouse, instead, like kids used to rent out bounce houses in and still do, right? Where you jump up and down and a company comes and sets it up. You could theoretically have a more, a decentralized rentals of digital experiences. And, we'll see how that plays out and if that's where things go. But I think, we're just scratching the surface on things that can be rented. And I think what's important here is to create that infrastructure and test it, right? As I think there most things in the blockchain space, we're kind of learning by doing and improving by doing, and we have to make a lot of mistakes before we land on the right thing. So I think the value prop is huge, right? Just generally, and it's great to see that you guys are pushing that in the gaming space.
Awesome. So I see we have a lot of Satoshiverse avatars in the audience here, and we have a lot of members of the community who come back and listen to the recording. So Nick, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of an update about some of the things going on at Satoshiverse.
Sure, yeah. So we did a developer update the other day, and unfortunately, the sound did not record. So we wanted to post that, but we didn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give the Spark Notes of that, and I might have just aged myself. I don't even know if Spark Notes are still around, but I'll give the short version of what we talked about on that call, and really it's focused on several things. Actually, we've got probably either sometime this week, we're going to be releasing a patch to the game that's focused on certain optimizations, improvements. Transactions in game are going to go a lot faster. We made some changes to the loading sequence to try to improve on some bugs, little things that we think are going to smooth out the gameplay experience. That's minor, but we're working on some pretty big changes going into the next quarter, probably Q2, that we're going to release through another big content push. That's going to include a completely revamped speedrun tournament. So for those of you who kind of don't know the game currently, once you beat the campaign mode, the game essentially has a campaign mode and a speedrun mode. The speedrun is essentially the end game mode that happens after the campaign mode, and it's a timed run of playing through the game. What we're doing is we're revamping the speedrun mode to be more of a challenge, like a timed challenge mode. So it's going to play a lot faster. The runs are going to be a lot shorter, kind of like sprinting rather than a marathon, which was the other mode felt a bit more like a marathon. That's on the kind of the horizon. We're also working on a season pass, so you'll have seasonal objectives and seasonal prizes that you can only get during that season. So those who are playing now are essentially going to have a chance to get kind of I always give the party hat example from RuneScape, but these early items that'll go down in the lore and the history of the game as like a one-time only. If you wanted them, had to be playing at that time. So we're going to have a lot of items like that will be part of our first season. We are going to be introducing another big thing, which I'm super excited about, is our aesthetics feature. And the rollout is going to be relatively simple. You'll be able to use different avatars within your inventory in place of your current avatar. So if you have a really leveled up avatar, but you want to use a different one for a run just because you want to see it differently and you want to use the aesthetics, that's going to be possible. And this will include the created avatars. You can kind of do a customized experience. You're going to be able to change the masks on your avatars, and you're going to have weapon skins as well. So some really cool stuff there. But what I'm excited about that is because that's going to open the door for us to, it's essentially laying the groundwork and the infrastructure for collaborating much more meaningfully with outside projects, so that we can relatively easily say, hey, I'm part of the Omniverse community. I have X token, so I'm going to be able to play with, the mascot or the Omniverse avatar, or, eventually, hopefully, as interoperability standards get better, this will lay the groundwork for, unique avatars from other projects within our game. But I think our first, and kind of going back to what's available now, right now we have a partnership with about 35 projects that were part of our initial mainnet launch. You can go in, including Omniverse, I believe. You can go in, you can mint an avatar. You can essentially create your own avatar with a patch from that project, and you'll be able to then play for free. And if you get to level 5, which is relatively easy, you're going to be able to mint that avatar for free to the blockchain and have the PFP of your own customized avatar. So that was something we were really excited about. But that to me is just step one. And when we talk about collaborating meaningfully and crossover between IPs, we want to start really doing that. We want to look at the potential for having enemies from other projects, for having good guys from other projects as well. If we have our Satoshi character, who's kind of the mascot of our project, and we've been talking to different projects about getting Satoshi into that project as a potential thing that our holders can do in another gaming experience. And I think that is like the first step in a very long staircase of what interoperability and collaboration will eventually mean in this space. And our game is a very particular experience, right? It's a desktop-based high fidelity game, and so it is a somewhat limited user base that we can pull from. So what we want to make sure we're doing is that if we do have partners who have players who enjoy games like God of War and and the Dark Souls and some of these higher fidelity games, that they have an opportunity to play something like that, potentially featuring that IP, whether it's their avatar from the IP or whether it's the mascot or whatever it might be within our game. Because a lot of projects have incredible lore, they have really cool avatars, but they've chosen to make a more casual game or a browser game, which I think makes a ton of sense, not knocking it at all. But there's also potential to have those avatars in a totally different experience. And so that's what I'm excited about. That's kind of where all this hopefully is headed. But we're going to be releasing a lot of kind of foundational tech that gets us there in the very near future. And so you guys will start to see what that's like. And then, as we go into the rest of the year, I think we're going to have some pretty cool opportunities there. So I'm excited. I think between the aesthetics and the new speedrun mode, the game is going to play very differently and feel very different. And then, it's just building upon that. So lots coming, a lot of things I can talk about that I just did, but also things I can't talk about right now that are in the works and being designed. So just, excited for the future, keeping things going and keeping building with the great community.
Awesome. Thank you for the updates, Nick. And the RuneScape party hat reference really, really took me back. Like really, really took me back. So thank you for that. Moving on to, I think we probably have time for one more question for the group. And Omniverse, Engineer, you could probably start us off with this one because you were excited to talk about it. But what aspects of a game do you believe should live on-chain versus off-chain, and why?
Oh, perfect. Okay. So that's a funny question because it really kind of depends on who you ask. And what we have found when chatting with some of the other layer ones and layer two blockchains out there, they want everything on chain, right? Because that's how they not only kind of make their get their revenue is from the fees on those transactions, but it's also one of their key metrics, right? Like how many transactions do you have on chain? That is not always the best thing for the user, however, especially when you consider chains that have gas fees associated with them, right? So we've seen a lot of different kind of gaming models where some games have a large volume of microtransactions. So some of them are like play to earn type games where you're playing and you're earning, and each of those little earnings is a transaction that you have to pay gas for. But similar with I don't know, interactions in the game, right? Those are transactions and they require gas fees. And so when you look at some of the more popular, larger blockchains like Ethereum, even some of the level two or the layer twos, that's just not good for the user because those fees add up. You really have to find the right balance. And I think that's what we have attempted to do with Omniverse by having kind of the backbone of our platform be our gasless layer one blockchain. So we would still like to kind of partner with other layer twos and bring our platform to their games. But the way that we have set up our platform is such that a lot of the kind of game interaction is done off chain and kind of consolidated off chain. But then when the time is right, it's brought on chain. And so I think it's really just a matter of finding the right balance for that's good for the kind of the overall ecosystem, but also for the end user as well. So I know that I kept that pretty generic, and I know that if any of our community members are listening, they know what I'm talking about. But I think it's really a matter of finding the right balance because it depends who you ask, and it's not always good for everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a hybrid system is ultimately where we're going to get to, at least until the technology becomes way more efficient. I think we implement a very similar approach. Our entire ecosystem is progression based, and so as you progress deeper, the incentive essentially goes up to actually own that item on chain. But it kind of like the items you might leave on the floor and not even pick up in a traditional RPG. there are items that you may not have progressed very far, and thus you don't care that much about, and therefore, you're not trying to sell them, you're not trying to transfer them, you're not trying to rent them. So all these aspects of the the value prop of a decentralized player economy, which for me is kind of the core value prop for gaming NFTs and Web3 and gaming generally. And I think there's some other auxiliary value props, but I think at the end of the day, ownership is really what drives all of this. And I think that you have to have a reason to want to own that particular asset, right? And so if you make people own everything on chain, and if every movement's being tracked on chain, that may not work very well. Now, that said, there's definitely blockchains that are working on kind of different approaches to this. I think ICP is a good example. They have a completely different infrastructure with how the blockchain works, and which is a little bit more tailored to a ton of stuff being done on chain, and kind of this hybridization of off chain and on chain. It sounds like you guys are working with something similar. I also think that creating the hybrid infrastructure is definitely important from an onboarding perspective. I think that we're getting way better with tooling for easy onboarding, but it's still not quite there yet. And I think that when you want to create kind of a Web 2, Web 3 hybrid game where elements of your ecosystem can live off chain, that's also going to allow you to hit a wider user base in this market who may not be ready to kind of take the Web3 leap. And now, yes, of course, we have social wallets, we have all sorts of abstraction methods, and it's getting pretty streamlined to do such things. But even there, it's just now that SDKs are coming out for Unreal Engine, for example. And so certain desktop-based games, it's still a little bit difficult to, you're dealing with super new tech that can break and, can have issues. And so I think, at least our experience has been that if you start from a more Web 2 based approach and allow the users to choose what they take on and off chain and make it simple for them to do so, users are going to get to a level of comfort with which things they want to hold on their wallets, which things they don't. And, with that comfort, as you take things off chain, you have users who are willing to deal with a little bit of extra friction. I think eventually we get to a point where there's no extra friction, and I think that would be great. But I don't think we're there yet. And I think that if we do, and then there's just stuff that doesn't need to be on chain, right? Like you don't need every player movement to be on chain. I know there's certain games that every time you move around, that's being recorded. And I mean, some of that stuff is I think a little bit excessive, but it may work for certain game styles. We went through this probably a year and a half ago when people were saying, oh, we want to invest in fully on-chain games. And I kind of asked them, like, what does that mean, right? Like, what is a fully on-chain game? Because yeah, exactly what you were saying. If you build a game that's fully on-chain, good luck, right? Like what's the driver of value in that game unless it's hyper simplistic, and what can you actually achieve on the blockchain currently in its current state? And I think the tech's getting a lot better, and that statement will age poorly because I think over time we're going to see a lot more is possible on chain, but I think that for now the hybrid approach really makes a ton of sense, and our view is that anything that touches the player economy and ownership should be on chain to the extent the user wants it to be, and I don't think we should be forcing that upon players at this point.
Love it. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Hernani or No Futures, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what was said. The idea that ethos of Web3 and everything should be on chain. But I've also had experience playing on chain games when, even Matic, which is, reasonably tame in terms of transaction fees gets crazy. So like from the Aavegotchi perspective, they're actually creating a CDK on Matic. So it'll be Gotchi chain, and the Ghost token, which is our ecosystem token, will now be the gas token, which gives it another use case, which is pretty cool. With that, fee should be negligible, like because all of our transactions will be on like a roll up essentially. So I think like it's possible, from a UI perspective as a gamer, I don't want to sign a million transactions. I'm a little older, like I'm 40, so I remember having to hit loading windows and just wait. And like that's essentially a transaction, but like, many of them. So I do love all these account abstraction things that we've seen. I play a lot of Boomland, Hunters on Chain, created a wallet from there using Sequence based off my email. And Courtyard is another great example on Polygon that does this, where you can set up basically straight from an email and start tokenizing your Pokemon cards and trading them. I think it's a good rabbit hole start for a lot of normies who want to kind of dip into Web3. Taking a Web 2 to Web 2.5 to Web 3 approach, I think in a layered tier manner is the best approach. Aavegotchi's doing that right now with the DAO because we have like 9 or 10 gaming loops that are coming out. Some of them are just like a app store game, Licky's Escape, which is no crypto involved except that it's the IP based on Aavegotchi stuff, and it was actually created by a community member's take on the IP. And they're running a competition though that if you finish the game, you automatically enter a drawing to win one of 36 blueprints, which is a NFT that'll be distributed on I think Polygon or Mainnet for some of these people who complete the game. So it's completely Web 2, but it allows you to kind of abstract and start moving up into maybe Web 2.5, which are some of the other games, Stratagotchi. There's no tokens involved, up to like full Web 3 games where we have our Gotchiverse where everything's on chain. Like, you collect tokens, you can collect ERC 20 tokens, and then when you exit, you have to hit a vortex, which is an on-chain transaction to cash out. So there has to be levels to this. I don't mind as a player having more centralization and just having a smooth experience. But, I think we're at the very early stages of blockchain gaming where all this stuff is still very noticeable. We're watching like the Frankenstein move a bit. And as it evolves, you won't see any of it and it could still be on chain.
Nani, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what was said as well, but it's important to highlight that Web3 gaming, the whole reason why we're all here is because of the on-chain aspect of blockchain games, right? So having critical information on chain, like the custody of the assets, who owns what, that type of thing, it's really critical to have that information on chain. That being said, it's also important to note that, especially in the context of blockchain gaming, your assets or whatever information you have on chain is worthless if you don't have a company behind that game that is actively pushing updates, listening to feedback of the community, and actually developing that game. So there is a centralization aspect to Web2 gaming that is not so common on DeFi applications, for example. So I believe that it's much more acceptable to have a lot of these very common in-game actions actually off-chain, where the game or the game developer is responsible for managing it, rather than have everything on-chain. Because like No Futuristic said, if you're asking for people to do one transaction for every in-game action that they have, that's a lot. That's going to create some friction on the user experience. There are some games that are taking that approach. I believe they're called full on-chain games at this moment, but I haven't seen any of those become really popular yet. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully that's going to be something that we're going to fix in the future. But it's definitely a hard balance that the industry has to learn how to make it right.
Awesome. This has been an incredible discussion, but we are running out of time here. So I do want to announce our winners of our giveaway. And Nick, I might have you explain how to claim it right after I announce the winners here. But the winners of 5 Satoshi's crystals each are Gerard, or 0x Gerard, and Kawasaki.Soul at Amsterdam at Kawasaki for Soul. Congratulations to our 2 winners. Nick, please explain how they can claim their prize.
Yeah, so very quick. Satoshi's crystals are our key in-game resource. It's an ERC 1155 NFT when it's minted, but in-game it is the resource that we use for all of the kind of key transactions and things in-game. And I say resource because it's not a currency, it's not a means of exchange, but it's the kind of key to unlocking all of the different things you want to do within the game, and min-maxing and leveling up your character and a lot of different things. And so, so if you're going to, if you'd like, if you are one of the winners, all you have to do is register an account on our website, game.legions2029.com, and then just DM us, and we will add the crystals to your game account. And then if you'd like, you can mint them as an NFT and do whatever you want with them, or you can jump into the game and you'll have 5 crystals that you can use as you progress through. That's what I would love for you guys to do, and then let us know, if you what you think and how things are going. We'd love to have you as a member of the community. So definitely, check it out. But to claim it, create an account and then DM us with the account details, and then, or the name of the account. We'll add the crystals to those accounts. So I think that's it for now. Thanks again to the host. I think this was a really cool conversation. I don't think we've talked about NFT rentals before, at least not in a long time. So it was really, really great to dive in pretty deep there. I know we went pretty deep in there, but I also love what you guys are doing at Omniverse. I think, we have a very similar, mentality on how this space is going to grow and develop, and building ecosystems for gamers so that you can have different experiences. So definitely excited to keep working with you guys and having you on, and this goes, for both the guests. Love to have you on in the future, and get an update on how things are progressing. But definitely looking forward to our next conversation, which will be next week. If you enjoyed this, we do it every week, so feel free to jump back in. Thank you to everyone who attended live, and I know some people will be watching the recorded version, so thank you to you guys as well. We'll be back next week with another episode. So I'm gonna end. I know there's a little bit of a delay, just for the speaker's sake. I know there's a little bit of a delay after I stop talking for when I have to end the space. So I'll stop talking now. You guys feel free to say anything you would like, and then I will wait a little bit, and then I'll end the space.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure. If anyone is interested in more in NFT rentals, if you're a game developer and you want to potentially introduce that to your game, or if you are a player and you want to learn more about how that works and potentially be an early user, feel free to reach out. Our DMs are always open.
Also, we host a game night on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. I do it here on X. It's a space. We play a whole bunch of games and give away prizes if you win top prize, different Polygon NFTs, and we interview different community peeps. So come through and play some games, a lot of poker, and try to win something.
Always a pleasure, guys. So I think this is my 3rd time being on, and I always learn something and enjoy myself. So thanks for having us on, and talk to you guys next time.
All right. Bye, everybody.